3:01 in order to be respectful of our speakers' time and our time. Let's get started. So today we are not going to have our traditional regional meeting. We will be having a speaker. So if anybody has any issues or concerns that they need the committee or staff to address, please send us an email. You can send one to Joey Ussery or April Lynn, myself, Doug, Todd, or Joe Minardi at the home office, and we will be happy to follow up with anything. Today, we are going to continue the training that we started during Blueprint Week a couple weeks ago, where we heard from Mike Dunn, and then you heard from all of us kind of in the government relations department talking about the high level important things that we need to accomplish both at the state and federal level. And this week, over the next 3 days, we're going to do an executive sales training for advocacy specific sales tips. So we have brought in Dan Eckstein. He is a partner at Sajak Public Affairs. He has over 20 years in the PAC and advocacy world. Through Sajak Public Affairs, he works with many corporate PACs, association PACs, and before joining Sajak, he worked in our industry and financial services running the PAC for JP Morgan and Chase. He and his team at Sajak have worked to develop this training. Today will be an overview, and then tomorrow and tomorrow's Wednesday. So Thursday we'll go into a couple of the topics a little more deeper, doing a slight overview every day. We will be recording this and packaging it so that you can watch it on demand. And the major goal that I would like to achieve from this training is that in 2021, we need to really broaden the base and bring up our number of PAC contributors, just like membership. IFAPAC, a number of contributors has been going down, and we really need to stem that tide. And so over this next election cycle, we'll be doing that, and we'll be hopefully partnering with Sajak Public Affairs to help do more trainings like this throughout the year and in the future. Otherwise, let's take it away and go to Dan.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, and good afternoon, everybody. Very excited to be with you. I'm admittedly, we're 8 months into this pandemic, so I'm still, as though we've done these Zoom trainings a number of times, but it's always sort of interesting to do this virtually versus, my preference. I'm sure your preference would be to do it in person as well. So thank you for bearing with me as we go through this. Very excited. Before I get into sort of this persuasive conversation topic, when Stephanie and I, we've been talking, I'm very familiar with your profession, with your industry, and I know many of you have probably very strong sales backgrounds and training. And so that actually to me is fantastic. Hopefully the things that I'll be talking about today, and we'll sort of hopefully try to make this a little bit interactive, will reinforce many of both the principles and the tips and the tricks that you probably have made you very successful in your careers. And so I appreciate the opportunity. I must say that Stephanie was kind. I ran a number of corporate PACs before moving into the consulting space. And for the first couple of years when I went into consulting, I was sort of just moving by pure energy, right? Failure was not an option. And about 5 years ago, I began to sort of go down the path of learning sort of executive sales and executive sales principles. And what I realized was I had just never been properly trained on sales. I was just sort of going in with blunt force and hoping people would, support the PAC and our, whether it was JP Morgan or Capital One's political objectives. I had really never, understood the psychology of sales, the discipline of outreach. So for many of you that have this background and experience longer than me, I admire you. And it really made me start to think about how in the PAC space and the advocacy space, many of the folks that I was interacting with, my peers, really hadn't gone down that path either, on sort of really appreciating sort of the executive sales component. So there's a company that actually I think has worked with some of you or some of the groups you work with called Southwestern Consulting. And so I've partnered with them for a number of years now. And so some of the things, if you've worked with Southwestern or you're familiar with their model, I've been inspired by them. And so this is where some of these principles come from. So with that, Joe, I think let's go to the next slide. Obviously, I wanted to start here because, and again, for many of you, you're probably familiar with this, you know, when it comes to sort of the PAC and advocacy outreach, both, and some of you, I think Stephanie had told me, some of you will be, this is obviously very PAC oriented, but some of you also wear the hat and encourage your colleagues to, you know, be more involved on the grassroots side. You know, all of this, as you can appreciate, it's all about sales, right? Persuading your colleagues to participate and do things. And for some reason, even though for many of us that, you know, are successful in sales roles, asking people for their personal money for politics or to engage is very sensitive, right? And there's a lot of apprehension in doing that. And so part of the reason to do all of this is because, you know, folks like Stephanie and Joe have put together really strong materials, right? All of the talking points, the checklists, the scripts, you know, the schedules, all the things that you're probably very familiar with to sort of help you have conversations from a technical aspect. What I was hoping, or I guess I should say also the hard materials, what, you know, hopefully we can do today is talk a little bit more of the soft skills on this stuff. And so I do think it all starts with mindset. I do think your words matter as it relates to sort of how you think about this outreach. You know, I work with a lot of medical groups also, for example, and, you know, their PAC board of directors. These are, you know, physicians that are accomplished in their own right, but they don't want to have the conversation with some of their colleagues mostly. And they never tell me this, but the sense that I pick up is their fear of rejection. They don't want to be personally rejected if they call someone and ask them to support their advocacy, their association's advocacy program, because they don't want to be told no because they'll take it personally. Well, so again, as for those of you that have this this training from your business perspective, you know it's not personal, right? To some extent. So being able to sort of have this conversation and to start with the mindset that you want them to have, again, a buying atmosphere. You want to create this opportunity where when you're having a conversation with your colleagues, that you want them to feel just as comfortable saying no to you as they would saying yes. And you know, obviously we're hoping that they will be persuaded in a positive way to support your efforts and the PAC. But if not, that's okay too. You want to be able to sort of, again, have that rapport with them. So mindset, you know, is your self-talk. Obviously, it's your self-image. It's very powerful. So the more confident and empowered you are in this, that will come across, of course, both in your tone, and if you're doing this by video, you know, it'll come across in your, you know, the way in which you're sort of, you know, showcasing to them as well. As I'm just sort of looking at my notes here, again, you know, you're trying to change their perceptions about sort of political engagement. And I guess if we could start with sort of the first exercise here, I see many of you are on mute, but I'd love to get a reaction. When someone says sales, what are your reactions? I see Craig is either raising his hand or doesn't want to be called on, and he's hiding himself.
No, I think this is what people think of when they think of sales.
Oh, stay away. Exactly. Any other comments on that? Agree, disagree? What do you think of, Craig? And so I'm going to pick on you because you were kind enough to sort of raise your hand per se. You know, what do you think of in the word service, right? So when I say service, what does that mean to you? Service
or servant?
Service.
When I think of service?
Yeah, the word service.
Helping somebody.
Exactly.
Delivering in a time of need.
And we had someone in the chat say client care is what they think of when they think of service.
That's the goal of all of this, right? That's the obvious goal, which is if, you know, your outreach is really meant to, you should be reaching out to your colleagues. You're providing them value by having this conversation, by bringing them into the opportunity to talk about, your industry, your profession, right? How to protect your profession, the future of your profession. Why would you be, and to talk about your path to getting there? That's again, going back to sort of, you have all of the technical information you need. And my conversation with Stephanie lends me to also understand that you know how to pivot to get back to Stephanie or Joe if you have any questions about specific technical things. But really, I think more of your colleagues want to hear about your journey as to why you're doing this versus being a pilot, an airline pilot, right? Why are you in this profession? Why are you a part of the association? Why do you give to the PAC? And why did you decide to go down this path and ask others to join you, right? That's the opportunity that hopefully you can sort of express. Because remember, again, from those with you with the sales perspective or background, really sales is, right, the transference of emotion. So if your passion for your profession can come through, that's really going to be the value. And and you're not cold calling people, right? This is not a cold call. You're reaching out to your colleagues. So you actually already share a similar connection with them. And there's real power and opportunity with that. And again, part of I think the opportunity here is to learn from them. If you don't know who some of these folks are, again, you share a connection, but, to learn more about them, and the conversation with the PAC and the opportunity to support the program, will hopefully naturally come through with that. So back to Craig, to the point, another comment is, you're really providing a service to your colleagues by having these conversations. You're not there to sell them on this. That's at least the way that I would try to reframe it. So next slide. Again, but it is important to sort of recognize we're all in sales, right? And so I guess this slide could have been sort of sequenced differently, but I used to sell cars when I was in college. This is, Craig, to your point, this is not about getting as much as you can as fast as you can. This really is about an opportunity, to actually, and again, to ask questions, to really understand what those that you're reaching out to, to understand, do they even know about the advocacy efforts of NAFA, right? Are they even familiar with what a PAC is? We're in such a natural time now because of the elections, and one can view that as sort of a negative. But frankly, our democracy, our system of government is very noisy, it's very messy. But in the famous words of Winston Churchill, right, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the rest, right? So we actually, it's a real privilege for us to be in this system, and you have an opportunity to engage in a conversation with your colleagues about it. So again, you're not trying to sell them on this, and you want to, you're really hoping to bring them down a path where they will provide some sort of response, yes or no, about supporting the effort. So going to the next slide, it's amazing how, the words matter when you say pitch, right? When I think of the word pitch, subconsciously the hair on the back of my neck, goes up, because I'm like, oh God, I don't want to hear what they're telling me, right? But again, this is all about, and I'm spending time on this mindset part because it really is about your attitude and your conviction, and you're not trying to take advantage of anything. You're really trying to explain the opportunity to support your efforts.
And Dan, if you don't mind, so I am definitely a culprit of saying pitch, and I say, prepare your PAC pitch, because it's alliteration, and I like that as well. So I think that will be good for me as well as everybody else to try to talk about it from a different perspective. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's really just an opportunity to support the program. Good look, asking for money in politics is very uncomfortable. Right. And I'm not trying to snow you by saying that's not what that is the goal. Right. The goal is to get people to participate, and the demonstrator of support is to make a contribution. Right. From the PAC perspective. So there's no way around it. But if you can talk about this as an opportunity to support the profession, there's better value there. You're having more of an empowering conversation than if someone feels like you're just trying to get them to support something that they may not fully understand. And that's also the opportunity for you to ask questions, which is to really learn, like, do they even understand what the acronym means, right? PAC. Why does the association have it? why is it important to, as a part of all the things that, NAIFA does from an advocacy perspective, why is campaign finance, why is the PAC an important component to build and strengthen relationships with candidates throughout the country that champion your issues, particularly now when it's such a volatile time and there are populist political movements going on where, changes are swinging from one side to the other. NAIFA's, your ability through the PAC and all the other things that the association does to strengthen relationships with policymakers makes a difference now more than ever. It's actually that, I'm going to go off script a little bit here, but, during the pandemic, at the height of it, right, when everybody was focused on all of the technology tools, and Stephanie's probably, and Joe are familiar with all these tools where you can text people and we're doing these Zoom things. A lot of the success of the advocacy tools when we were in the heat of the quarantine or midst of it was, the success of getting connections with members of Congress and their staff was forged on all of the offline activities that you guys have been doing for years. It just was sort of highlighted, during, you could just sort of see people, on Zoom. So what you're doing is, you're reinforcing all the offline activity it's never going to go away, and it's just as essential. So as you think about the PAC too, you really, and how your words matter, thinking of ways not to reinforce the pejoratives, right? That's what I'm trying to get to here. The asking people for money in politics is a hard enough hurdle in and of itself. You want to try not to reinforce any of those negatives. Any comments or reactions?
Dan, we do have a comment from Craig again. Craig, do you want to ask your question or would you like me to read it out loud? Okay, and Craig, just before you start, anybody on the phone, if you need to unmute, it's *6. Thank you. Go, Craig.
Yeah, I was just curious to know, Dan, as I've been doing this for a couple of years now, I've kind of changed my tone, and I guess I'm curious to know what your feedback is, good or bad, related to the approach, but trying to put this more back onto our member, that any PAC contribution is an investment in their business. So instead of thanking them or, thanks for helping us make our goals, it's more about, hey, congratulations on making an investment in your business and protecting your business and protecting your clients' futures and stuff like that.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts about changing that? Maybe that's a bad idea. What would your feedback be to somebody like me that's saying things that way? No,
well, first of all, Craig, I wanted to know if you saw my next slide, because I'm going to get to that. Which we can actually go there now if you want. So basically, I love this emoji, by the way. But to answer your question directly, people are going to invest in your PAC for their reasons, not yours. So if I heard you correctly, the way that you're framing this is how supporting the PAC, how being a part of this broader advocacy effort is only an investment in the future of their profession. I think that's fantastic. What I think, though, if I may be a little bit presumptuous, I think the opportunity then is to further strengthen the conversation, ask more questions, to see to really pull out from them if they are synced up with your thoughts on what that means.
Okay.
If they can really appreciate, because you've been doing, if you've been doing this for some time, you already skipped to step 6, right? You know what the acronym means. You've gotten all this material. You've had this opportunity to go through the training. The folks that you're reaching out to, they probably need a little bit more 101 on why you're doing this. And by the way, with that lack of information and with all the other noise that's happening outside about super PACs and dark money and all these other terms, that sort of filters into our thought process. And there's probably an opportunity as you're having these conversations to try to really ask them questions. What are their thoughts of what a PAC is? Like, what do they think, NAIFA's PAC does, right? To really, again, for those of you that have a sales background, you know this better than I do. The best sales conversation is one where we're talking less and they're talking more. So really to spend time trying to tease out from them their perspectives on what this is. So going back to this slide with this emoji that I just happen to just personally enjoy seeing is, again, people, and Stephanie and I were talking about it earlier, right? People, people hate to be sold things, right? But we love to buy stuff, right? And I think particularly as it relates to this effort, as you're talking about your PAC and your advocacy efforts, they're not really going to give because or invest in this because they want it or need it. Obviously, that's not the case, but they're going to do it because they trust you. So I think your opportunity here is how, again, just in how you do this in your current business role, how do you establish trust and rapport with your colleagues? That's really the opportunity, because all the technical components of the PAC and the limits and all the hard stuff, the public policy issues, the candidates use, all that stuff, Stephanie and Joe can give you easily. You can sort of forward that stuff to them easy. The real opportunity is to make sure that they understand, why you support it, and then get from them reasons why they think this would make sense for them as well. So the next slide is, again, for those of you, I keep reinforcing this because my sense is that this all should make sense and kind of click in how it does in your professional world on your current business. But there's a sales cycle for this as well. So let me ask a question. I would be curious for a reaction. So when you see this sales cycle for the PAC, where do you think if I'm the recipient of your conversation, where do you think I'm making my decision? At what stage in this cycle do you think I'm making my decision?
Go ahead and type it into the chat and I will let everybody know, or go ahead and give us your answer live.
I see objections, concerns. I see presentation. I see introduction. So Lynette. So Lynette, that's right. I think the approach introduction is where the decision's made. Right? Everything else is sort of, so it's the targeting is what Stephanie and Joe are working with you on regionally providing the list. Your first conversations where those initial impressions, that's where that's happening. And you're just reinforcing points through all the material. And the opportunity is to, even if they're not sure about it, right, as you're having your conversation, is to be able to obviously, tailor your conversation through your presentation as it relates to sort of how they're receiving information, being able to answer objections or concerns, really trying to understand. And I was a victim of this when I was so excited about, frankly, my own business and talking to people about Sajak, services, and people were providing objections. I would be going tit for tat with them, right? I was sort of arguing with them. That's obviously the wrong way to do it, And so the opportunity is to sort of, if there are questions, concerns, to try to get all that in, right? Really understand what the concerns are. And then that probably gives you the next stop to schedule the next conversation in the meeting you're in, to have the follow-up conversation. So if you're doing this right, I actually think you're probably going to have 3 to 4 conversations. I think there's a first conversation. And by the way, that has nothing to do with the logistics of, can you talk, Tuesday at 3 versus Wednesday at 4. That's just the logistics of the scheduling. I think there's a very quick, 10 to 15 minute conversation on the front end. There could be a follow-up conversation. And there even may be a third to really get a response as we talk through closing and follow-up. If you go beyond sort of 3 or 4 conversations about this, something isn't right, right? We probably haven't properly transitioned to, this is why I'm calling. This is what the opportunity is. Is this, it's okay to say no. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about this? Right? So I'm not trying to make this harder for you. I'm just trying to set the expectations that if you're doing this right, it may be a series of small conversations that get someone to the answer. Because, you're probably easier to have someone pick up the phone and talk to you and say, look, can I spend 3 to 5 minutes scheduling an opportunity to talk about an opportunity? Versus, can I talk to you for a half hour about the PAC? Right? Just the two comparing sort of, gives you a sense of where someone may go.
And Dan, we have a good question from Laura DeGollier in Wisconsin. A big problem that we all face is getting them to actually answer the phone. Many of the agents screen their calls and have decided before they ever talk to you about about if they're going to answer the phone or not. So what do you think the appropriate voicemail message is to leave in order to get someone to return your call or pick up the next time you call?
I deal with gatekeepers all the time. So Laura, thank you for that question. It's excellent. So the first thing I would do, and I say this not to play a game, because I'm not playing a game in terms of being coy about it. But if you leave a voicemail that provides all the information, you've given them all the reasons to say no. So I'm looking at Laura DeGollier's screen. So if I'm calling Laura and Laura does not know me, my tip or trick would be to say, "Hi, Laura, it's Dan. Can you call me at 202-590-7459? Hang up the phone. Laura's gonna be like, "Who is Dan? Have I talked to Dan? All right, let me just call him back." That's what you want to do. I'm excited about it, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to say, "Hey, Laura, it's Dan Eckstein. I'm calling from NAFA and from IFAPAC. I got to talk to you about, I really hope you'll give to the PAC, and it's so important. And this is a very important election year." Click. What you really want to do is, again, you're not trying to play a game, but you want someone to call you back. So being slightly ambiguous is of value to you, because you want to be able to sort of, can you give me a call back? I want to talk to you about an opportunity.
And Dan, sticking on to the same about the call kind of topic, what would you say is better, to try and set up a face-to-face call, because we all have FaceTime, Zoom, or some type of way where we can see the person, or would you stick to that traditional phone call?
So the first thing I'm going to say, just as a quick reaction, is, and I have some of this on some of the other slides, and I'm going a bit slow, so I probably have to speed up a little bit. But the worst thing you can do is just forward whatever email Stephanie and Joe sent you. That's the most passive way to do it, and you shouldn't expect any reactions from the people that you're sending these emails to, right? I mean, if you do get a response, that's great, but you're talking basis points, right? So the first, second, third thing is to try to connect with them live in some way. The phone is obviously the most would be good. This type of video, I mean, the studies have not come out yet about sort of in-person meeting versus the Zoom sort of conversion rate. I mean, if you have that information, please tell me. But I would suspect that if you can hear me, obviously by, because I'm on audio, but for those that can see me on camera, you can sort of see me bouncing my head around. You can see my body language, and in the presentation, again, for those of you with this background in sales, that body language is actually a much more powerful way to communicate information. And so the opportunity to sort of see somebody, I think, would be preferable. The next slide, if we can, because I know we have to move a little bit quickly. But again, going back to, and again, this is about trying to understand people's styles. So for those of you that are aware of this model, there's a lot, if you've taken Myers-Briggs, there's lots of personalities, assessments of how people sort of communicate. So none of this should be new to you, but the framework that I like is sort of, these 4 personality types. And we only have, as so particularly if you're talking to someone on the phone, you only have a few seconds to make that first impression. So again, if you're a fighter, you're results oriented, you're impatient, you want to overcome odds, you don't want to lose control of the conversation, you want to get to the point. I'm sure many of you know people, or you may be this person, right? So if you're getting a sense from the conversation of what that person is, it's okay to just, here's the opportunity. Can I schedule time to talk with you about the PAC, or about ways to support IFA and our advocacy efforts? Is now a good time? You want to almost give them like A/B options, right? Is now a good time to talk? Yes or no? No. Okay, can we talk tomorrow at 3? Yes, right? It's sort of, that's the way you would sort of engage with a fighter in this conversation. You know, entertainer, as you can see, I am an entertainer. I am all the way down on that side of the spectrum, right? I'm enthusiastic, but I talk way too much, right? You know, my goal is to inspire others, and I hate hearing, I need affirmation. But it takes a lot of effort for me to stay on target, right? So if you're talking to someone about the ability to support, you know, IFAPAC or NAFA's advocacy efforts, and they just want to go down the path of the election, right? Well, that's a great topic, and you can spend hours talking about that. But can we schedule another time to do that, right? Right now, can we get back to the conversation about ways to support our industry? So if I'm a counselor, you know, in green, then I'm a team player, but I'm really a slow decision maker, right? I love consistency. I hate change. I'm really not a decision maker. That's not really what I do. I mean, I don't mind working towards a decision, but it takes a lot of effort to get there. So these are folks that say, well, let me talk to my spouse and let me talk to some others and think about this. Let me talk to some of my peers and get back to you. That's okay. Like, that makes sense. People, it's just how they need to process information. But again, that's where you want to be able to say, well, is there anything that I need to do to answer any questions for you? Is there any information that you need to help make the decision or help you think through this that I can provide you as you're working through it? And can I talk to you, you know, Wednesday at 4 o'clock, right? You want to keep them on pace. And again, it's okay if they say no, but you want to at least work towards that, that decision. And we'll get to closing again in a few minutes. There's also detectives, right? These are very detail-oriented people. They can get, you know, these are paralysis by analysis type folks. The folk, you know, sort of the face in blue, you know, they want accuracy. They don't want to make a mistake. So as you're talking to them, you probably want to limit their decisions, right? You want to give them, again, a choice of A and B, right? This is something where, you know, they may say, well, let me, you know, have Joe or Stephanie send me the list of the last 20 years of PAC contributions to candidates so I can then look it over. Okay, I could do that, but, you know, how will that change your decision whether you want to support the program or not, right? It's sort of that, it's those types of conversations that you should anticipate, like if, you know, as you're having the conversation, where they may be. You know, just, you know, slightly in their style, and then how you may, again, I assume for many of you in your current role, you experience this all the time. So it's how do you address that? How you tie it into this advocacy conversation about the PAC. Here's the first exercise that I was hoping we would get to. Again, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I was hoping we could do at least one exercise. So the next slide, if you don't mind, this is, let's go to the next slide just because it's my favorite one. So this is not me. So don't get any, you know, don't say anything negative about me. But this is about your story. And what I'm hoping is we can take a minute. You know, what makes a great story? In your initial conversation, as you're talking, is if you have 5 minutes, 3 minutes to talk about this, remember, a great story has emotion to it, right? If there's conviction, it helps solve a problem. It paints a picture. So what I'm hoping to hear in a minute is sort of your story, right? Why did you choose this profession? Why are you in it? Why do you believe in the mission of NAFA, right? I mean, the PAC is a component of supporting NAFA. Why do you believe in this? Back to Craig's earlier comment about, you know, how does this help the industry, right? How, you know, and how have you seen opportunities to supporting the PAC? How has it helped both your profession, but also your ability to, you know, to be a stronger sort of profession within the industry? So with that, why don't we take about, you know, 30 seconds or so. And if it's okay, Stephanie, I hope 1 or 2 folks would basically give the rest of the group sort of their story of it.
I think that would be great. And if not, we can always volunteer someone and ask them
Well, that'll be you,
Their
Stephanie.
story.
You voluntold someone. I will sort of sit back and because I want these people to, not to be too mad at me because I'm pushing them.
All right. Well, we have Lynette from Mississippi, I believe, is willing to share her story, and then I will pick on someone else on the call after Lynette.
Lynette, excited to hear your path.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
We
I can
can.
hear you.
I'm from Alaska.
Alaska. Sorry, Lynette.
No, that's okay. It's almost like Mississippi.
Connected.
I've never been to Mississippi.
No.
I need to go there. And there's a song about it that we sing all the time for kids. I do have an IFAPAC story because I accidentally ended up in the IFAPAC chair. And I did so because our IFAPAC chair member had a family emergency and couldn't make it to our advocacy meeting a year and a half ago, right? And so we're sitting around the table at our board meeting, and I get voluntold, and I was scared to death. I didn't think I was qualified. I didn't know why it ended up being me. It was just a matter of everyone else's schedule was full and you're it. And so I came to Washington, D.C. and really scared to death that I was going to say something I shouldn't say, that, I wasn't going to be qualified to talk with my legislators. I didn't even really know what I was doing there. Right. And I was so appreciative of NAIFA because I tell you, in my profession, I help other people understand how to plan for their future. But my biggest fear in social settings until I joined NAIFA was that someone was going to talk politics to me in a social setting. And I was just going to freeze up because I didn't want to be that girl who thought differently than everyone else in the room and not really know what to say. And so what happened was I became really educated on how it's okay to not be on one side or the other. Even if you have a dad that's a crazy Republican or a member in the office that's a crazy Democrat, right? So I learned how to maintain that neutrality and speak intelligently about those things. And I met with my legislators and I didn't screw up. And thank goodness for NAIPA for helping me do that. So that's my story.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
It's
And
true.
and on that point, it's Lynette really feeling comfortable to have a conversation, and you may not know the answer, and that's okay. And the beauty is you have a whole team and infrastructure that if someone that you're speaking to has a specific question about a specific public policy issue or wants to know where NAIF is with a specific candidate or race, you have a whole team that can talk to that, and you can say that's the opportunity to schedule the next conversation in the conversation you're in to say let me get those answers and come back to you. Again, I would imagine it's very similar to how you conduct your business conversations, where you're being a trusted resource.
Dan, we had Sandy in the comments. She said, advocating, contributing to the PAC differentiates me from other advisors. I go beyond and advocate on the issues important to Main Street America and my clients.
Yeah, I mean, it's about your worldview. I would imagine if you are very focused on the products and services that you're offering, that's a good thing. But if you have the ability to sort of connect the dots to the broader, sort of trends and landscape, I assume that just makes you even more powerful in your conversations with your clients. Going back really quickly, there was one, just if I may, there was a gentleman, Paul said, just in leaving the voice message, he said, we were talking off my script. Paul, if I want to make sure I answer your question or concern properly. Again, all we're trying to do if you're leaving a voice message is to get someone to call you back. So if you could try and say, hi, this is Dan, call me at, or hey, it's Dan, I have an opportunity I wanted to talk to you about, call me back. Again, all I was trying to express was to not give up all the information in the voice message or in the first email, whatever it may be, because you don't want to hand them all the bullets to say no to you. That was sort of what I was hoping to express. So if I didn't articulate that well, I apologize. Stephanie, should we continue? Lynette, thank you so much for
Yes, please.
for providing your story on that. So going back to the next slide, again, this is on slide 10. Oh, yep, on the story. Yep, there you go. Perfect. Which is, just to reinforce some of the things that Lynette was basically talking about, is to try to establish a connection as you're talking to folks, right? Building that rapport. If you have the opportunity in the first conversation and it feels comfortable to talk about the purpose, why, your purpose of being a part of the broader advocacy efforts for NAIFA, and why you decided to go down this path and basically reach out to others, right? And to talk about the value of engagement. Back to Lynette's earlier points. I was speaking just before this with a client on a different topic, and we were talking about the money in the system. And, my observation is that the money is only an indicator of support, a demonstrator of support. It's really sort of marketing spend to some extent, right? And so people, like to congregate with others that they like. And so if, you have the ability to support candidates that philosophically agree with you, then the money just is there to reinforce the brand of your association, right? So there's value in the relationships and the credibility that your association establishes, and they use the PAC to sort of as a demonstrator of that. And so that's sort of part of this conversation, is how, the PAC is used to, reinforce the credibility of your association and your industry. But on the next slide, you have to make the ask. There's no escaping it. Of course, this was pre-pandemic, so the phone was the easiest, iStock image that I had that I could find. But the two failures of the PAC, it's very simple, right? And probably in your own business, right? The two failures is failure to make the ask and failure to do the follow-up. Everything else is fluff, right? All of the infographics, all of the talking points, all that other stuff is there to sort of reinforce the two fundamental elements, which is you have to ask someone to support this effort, and you have to let them give you an answer. And again, going back to any answer is good. A no is good. I mean, you prefer a yes, but a no is good. A yes is good. A maybe is not good, right? You want to, and if it's a maybe on the first try, then there's the opportunity to sort of schedule the next conversation. Say, okay, well, what would you need to give the answer? So the next slide here, someone referenced it a few minutes ago, is elements of sort of personal communication. So some of you may be familiar. I'm looking down at my notes here. Dr. Albert Mehabrian's 7-38-55% rule. And again, this is basically how we as humans absorb information, right? And so when you just by spoken words is sort of 7%. When you're sort of reading emails and just sort of reading them out loud, there's a tremendous amount of what we absorb in our conversation and voice, our tone, our affect. You can hear what I'm hoping is some of the passion I have about what I'm doing as I'm talking with you. Like that's what you're absorbing. And if you get to see me, right? If you get to see me and the way I'm sort of, moving about, that's what takes somebody in, which is going back to that other comment about if you have a chance to do this by video, that would be, obviously the preference. It's in person is the first, second, third option in a pre-pandemic or, post Pfizer FDA approved vaccine. But until such time as we're all comfortable, doing this, in person, I think the phone and video would be obviously the best. If you're just forwarding messages from Stephanie and Joe, don't expect much in terms of response. Going quickly now, because again, we don't have too much time left, but some of these things would make sense. If you go to the next slide, is objections, right? So objections, as you can appreciate, is a normal part of the selling process. In fact, what I would actually say here is if someone is, as you're talking with them and they're giving you objections, that's a good thing because they're listening to you. They're actually trying to process the information. Right? If you can tell that they're not paying attention, that's a cue to actually probably right? Recalibrate the discussion, because you want to hear someone's concerns or questions about the PAC or your advocacy efforts, because that will then entail, how you will sort of, provide your response to them, right? So so you want to hear objections. You want to hear all the reasons that someone doesn't want to support this effort. And it really then gives you the opportunity to, to sort of ask more questions. So if you can go to the next slide, please, again, because I do want to leave a few more minutes for conversations. But there is sort of a time when you have to know when enough is enough, right? And sometimes, and I'm a victim of this because I'm an entertainer, I talk a lot. Sometimes we F up, part of my French, the close or the chance to finish, because I'm just talking too much and I won't shut up. I get it. I understand, right? So you have to gauge that in, the conversation with your colleagues as you're having these discussions. Closing, getting them to a point of decision is really, you want to bring them to that. You want your body language to be relaxed. You want the conversation to be relaxed. You kind of want to know where their buying line is, right? So sometimes we talk past it. Sometimes we data dump. Again, it's all how, again, this is a Southwestern Consulting slide, so this is cited from them. But, this, should make sense to you in, again, your current profession. You have to know when enough is enough in the conversation. And I would assume by you being part of this training, you are, you're successful in your career, so you kind of know how to gauge those conversations. So again, you don't want to sort of talk past the buying line, essentially. And we'll dive deeper into this in the next day or so. But the next slide, please, as we sort of get towards. So again, process. If these conversations, if your calls are not on your calendars, you're not going to do them. You have every intention to do it. You want to do it. Your goal is to do it. But you know what? 5 minutes after this call is over, you're going to be sucked into the vortex of your life. and you are going to totally, you're moving beyond, right? And so the opportunity is, as you're working with Stephanie and with Joe, is if you have a list per se of people that you need to do the outreach with, I would encourage you to schedule, the outreach, and, could be, 15, 20-minute blocks, whatever you do on your calendar to prioritize your projects and the things that are important. That's how I would sort of insert this. And the tracking is so essential here, because I do think that you're going to have a lot of logistics discussions. I can't talk to you now. I can talk to you Monday at 3 or whatever it may be. So because the logistics are going to sort of, consume a lot of this effort, and because you have, your day jobs and your family lives and all the other important things that you're doing, the ability to sort of have a very clear sense of, these are the people I reached out to and left a message. These are the people that I've had the first initial 5-minute conversation with. These are the folks that I talked to and said, send me more information, right? Again, none of this should be rocket science to you. This is probably how you conduct your current, sort of business development, or how you currently work on your projects. I'm just trying to reinforce that if you can't transfer that same effort into this, you're going to get really frustrated. And you're busy, and you don't want to waste your time and others' times.
And Dan, Lynette, she's getting ready to jump off, but
Sure.
She put in some great topics. She said, if you either manage your calendar or it will manage you. And it says, and she also says, we don't manage what we don't measure. So I thought those were great sayings to repeat to everybody. And then just in our process for our PAC, when we have these regional calls normally and we ask you to report back what's going on in your states, that's because we expect that you have made these calls to, see what's going on and hear these types of things. So this process fits right into what we are doing on a monthly basis. And we try to hold you guys accountable when we have these meetings.
Yeah, and as we wrap up, because I know we have, about 10 minutes left, and I don't want people to feel like I'm just sort of droning on, but the last slide is practice, practice, practice. So I'll be self-effacing here. Before I do public speaking, I write out my script and I say it in front of the mirror and I repeat it and I repeat it so that I feel natural in the flow of it. And I know, by the way, that I'm probably going to skip a couple of points that I would have liked to have said, but for the most part, I know the topic better than the people I'm talking to. Hint, hint. Right. So if I don't flub it up, you would never know that I didn't flub it up. And I just basically, though I've given this many times and I've hit all the points I want to make. But I would just say that it's similar to how you have your conversations. Again, as you're presenting products and services to your clients. I would try to do that here. And again, it also goes back to, I think, Lynette or someone's earlier conversation about, I think it was Lynette, about not being, completely cognizant of all the sort of political or public policy issues. And, frankly, I think more people want to just hear your, why you're doing this, right? And then, and connect with you, and then have a good conversation about ways to protect the industry. Those are, I think, the main sort of areas to sort of have your conversations with. And again, these are not cold calls. These are to your colleagues to some extent. So you should feel just as excited to call them as hopefully they'll feel, having a conversation with you. Though these are the main points that I wanted to sort of highlight in our quote unquote training. I hope that this was, helpful. I know we'll do a couple other things in the next couple days, but is there any reactions? Is there something that I missed? Something that someone doesn't agree with? I see things on the chat, but Stephanie, you tell me where to go. And how to do it.
Well, Dan, it seems like the last thing in the chat is me just asking everybody, why are they supporting IFAPAC and the industry to help drive home that question? We will stay on for the next few minutes, and if anybody has any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. Ryan from Washington said Southwestern Consulting always has great insight. So we're super excited that you're basing a lot of what you do off of there. I will, while people having a time to think of questions, let you know tomorrow we will continue with our second installment. I know today is the scheduled meeting for those of you in the Western region, but the links for tomorrow's Zooms are in tomorrow, and Thursday's Zooms are in your calendar invite. Feel free to please join us as we dive deeper tomorrow into mindset. And Dan, I'm sorry, I just lost it's mindset and
closing in mind, right? And objectives.
Yes.
But back to Ryan's point, if I may, just as a commercial for Southwestern. So when I again, my journey to this, when I started to look into organizations that do executive sales training, I won't sort of name one or two, but there was a few that I found that were really super aggressive, and they really try to find pain points, and they want you to really sort of exploit those pain points or pressure points to try to get someone to give you a yes or no answer. Obviously, fear is a very strong motivator. What I like about Southwestern as a compare and contrast is that it really is meant to be more about the positive experience. It's a little bit hippy dippy to some extent, but it really is. What resonated with me is that the conversation about politics is sensitive in its own right. Or it's sensitive enough. And there's all these other hurdles with, sort of the legal parameters and the compliance aspects and all these things. So as I was thinking about how to sort of, who has a successful model that I could sort of take aspects of and sort of mirror it into the advocacy space, I liked Southwestern's because it was all about creating a buying atmosphere, making someone feel just as comfortable saying no as they would saying yes. So that way you at least get an answer, right? Because that's sort of the fear part or the worst part is if you reach out to someone and they don't communicate with you on the back end, yes or no.
And Dan, we got one last question, and whether you completely answer this now or answer it more as we go throughout these trainings. This is probably one of the biggest objections or comebacks we get. I'm already a NAFA member. Why do I also need to contribute to the PAC? It's probably one of the biggest ones all PAC fundraisers face on a regular basis.
Well, that's a good question, and probably, Stephanie, one that you and I should talk through offline. But what I would just but I don't mean that to skirt it. What I would try to understand is I would try to ask some questions going back to them about, well, how do they view their role in NAFA? What value are they getting out of NAFA? Right? How has NAFA supported them? And if frankly, if it's if they give you a negative answer, well, it's going to be hard as blank to get them to support the PAC, right? So if the question is, look, I'm already a member of NAFA and I kind of think it sucks or it's not worth it, well, then I think that's the opportunity to sort of be an advocate for NAFA as a membership. Yep. And then just like, how can we help make sure that you feel that your membership is of value to you? Yes. And then there's probably a subsequent discussion about advocacy on the flip side, but you're not going to be able to get them to support the PAC if they don't value the membership on the front end. So I think that'd be my gut reaction. And then, there's probably opportunities to sort of, again, ask more questions about what that means to them.
And Dan, I think that that's actually a great answer because as NAFA is moving and growing, that's one of the things is all of the leaders of NAFA, which these PAC champions most certainly are NAFA leaders, need to be able to pivot from whatever their role is. So in this case, the PAC champions to just overall being a NAFA champion whenever necessary. So I think that was a perfect answer. And thank you so much. We are coming up on 4 o'clock. So I want to give a shout out. Thank you, Dan, so much. We look forward to meeting with you the next 2 days this week. And from there, I will give everybody a couple minutes back of their time. I'm seeing no new questions or thoughts in the chat box, so we can go for now. And we will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. and then Thursday at 11 a.m.
Thank you, everybody. It was really an honor to sort of spend a few minutes with you. And if you have any more questions, obviously, please let Stephanie know, and we'll answer them.
I was just going to say that I am biased because I had spent a couple years door to door for the Southwestern Company back in my college years. However, what I'll say is my past 5 or 6 years, I still pay for Southwestern Consulting. And I was going to say the content, even if it seems so fundamental for all the trainings you're going to run, you can't hear the basics enough, right? And so, I mean, especially, you can only stay on 4 hours because, it's like, there's not enough into what's in the background. You have your trophies on the wall, all that stuff. But Dan, I just have to say, appreciate you and NAFA bringing in that consulting, because if people really latch onto that, good things happen. So have a good day.
Thank you, Ryan. That was great. We really appreciate that. So we're gonna keep trying to bring in trainings like this and work with SAJAC as we move forward. So we will be respectful of your time and move on to the next meetings, but thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see some of you again tomorrow, and look out for the email at the end of November when we've packaged all 3 trainings so you can come back and watch them. All right, bye.